Good afternoon and welcome back, everyone. I'm Josh DeMorrett, State Government Affairs Director at ConocoPhillips, and I have the privilege of moderating this afternoon's session on a new approach to compliance. For most of the last decade, the relationship between operators and regulators in this country has felt like a tug of war. Rules written in Washington ignored what was happening on the ground, permitting timelines that stretched out for years on routine work, targets that kept moving, costs that kept climbing, and operators caught between trying to do the right thing and trying to keep the lights on. That tide is starting to turn. We have an administration that is engaging with industry rather than fighting it. We have a Region 8 EPA that is willing to come to Bismarck and sit at this table. We have a North Dakota regulatory model built over 25 years that has consistently shown that strong environmental protection and responsible development go together, not against each other. And we have an opportunity right now to redefine what compliance looks like for the next decade. That's what today's panel is about. We have brought together federal, state, and regional regulatory leaders to walk us through what this new approach looks like and what it means for the Williston Basin. First, Christy Woodward, Chief of Staff for Region 8 of the Environmental Protection Agency from Denver, Colorado. Region 8 covers North Dakota and several of the most active oil and gas states in the country. Christy brings deep policy experience and a practical understanding of how federal environmental rules actually land on the ground. Please welcome Christy Woodward. Next, Nathan Anderson. Nathan's the director of the North Dakota Department of Mineral Resources. He leads the state agency that regulates our oil and gas industry, including the Oil and Gas Division and the Geological Survey. He's a clear and capable voice for North Dakota's responsible development model and a steady partner for our industry. Please welcome Nathan Anderson. Dave Glatt is the director of the North Dakota Department of Environmental Quality. Dave has spent his career in environmental protection in North Dakota and is one of the most respected state environmental regulators in the country. Under Dave's leadership, North Dakota has built a regulatory program that protects our air, water, and land while supporting responsible energy development. Please welcome Dave Glatt. You should see the other guy. Rebecca Gibbons is the Assistant Deputy Ministry of Energy Regulation at Saskatchewan's Ministry of Energy and Resources, where she oversees regulatory initiatives supporting the responsible development of the province's oil, gas, and mineral resources. With more than 18 years of leadership experience in government and crown sectors, she brings deep expertise in innovation, environmental policy, sustainability, stakeholder engagement, strategy, and operations. Rebecca plays a key role in advancing regulatory approaches that support resource development across all phases, from exploration to reclamation. Please welcome Rebecca. And finally, Bethany Ihle, the Grasslands Supervisor for Dakota Prairie Grasslands at the U.S. Forest Service. Beth oversees the federal grasslands that overlap meaningfully with our oil and gas operations, and she brings a thoughtful, collaborative approach to the multiple use mission these lands are managed for. Please welcome Bethany Ihle. All right, these chairs are all right. We can deal with this. Good afternoon, everybody, and thanks for being here. For those of you who are from outside of Bismarck, thanks for coming. The intent of the panel today is pretty simple. We're going to have a constructive, forward-looking conversation about oil and gas regulation and how it can be durable. And by that, we mean predictable, defensible, and effective over time, while still doing what's most important, and that's protecting people in the environment. So the goal today is a friendly conversation. There's no gotcha questions in here. We've all collaborated quite a bit ahead of time. But the goal is to pull insights from each of our panelists based on their real world experience. So I did a brief introduction of all of our panelists, but I want to find out a bit more about them. And we'll start with Christy, if you want to tell us where you came to EPA from and some of your background.
You bet, thank you. I started my career as a civil engineer doing land development and community planning, and then went into the private sector, technical consulting, and I worked for the EPA, I worked for the Department of Defense, landed myself in very contentious mining permitting for about 7 years, and then got into the oil and gas industry. I was able to really cut my teeth working here in the Bakken, permitting big pads around Lake Sakakawea on that Métis Nation. Then had the opportunity to do air quality in the Upper Green River Basin, the Uinta Basin. And then I spent the last 7 years working for the Colorado Oil and Gas Association, where we did 46 rulemakings in the last 7 years. So spent a lot of time in industry on technical issues, and now have a great and tremendous opportunity to work for EPA as a presidential appointee, as a chief of staff for Region 8.
Yeah,
so
that's great.
Happy to be here.
Thanks so much for being here. Nathan, how about you?
Thank you, Josh. Before I get started talking about me, I'd like to do just one thing. I want to congratulate Dave on an incredible career with the DEQ. I know his retirement's coming up. We also have Ed Murphy, 46 years with the North Dakota Geological Survey. These two people have put in an incredible career for the state, so thank you. And then the other thing I'd like to do is to thank the Department of Mineral Resources staff, the Oil and Gas Division, and the Geological Survey for the great work that they do every day for the state of North Dakota. So thank you all. I know many of you are sitting in the front. Thanks. So I have going on 27 years of experience primarily in the oil and gas industry, roughly 25 and a half years in industry, and then recently came to the DMR almost 2 years ago. I'm a Minot, North Dakota native, just up the road, about an hour and a half. After graduating there, I went up to down to North Dakota State University with a degree in geology, and then made my way to Colorado for about 25 years before coming back about a year and a half ago. During that time, I worked in about 8 different states and just a broad range of assets, and hope to bring my broad range of experiences to the state of North Dakota.
Yeah, thanks for being here, Nathan. Dave, he touched on it, and I know you were backstage talking with Lynn Helms trying to get some advice on what the next stage is like, and he said, make sure you wear out, you don't rust out. You know, you've got obviously a pretty good gym routine, judging by the boot you're wearing, but congratulations on a long career at DEQ here in North Dakota, and we're so glad to have you here.
Well, thank you very much. One thing I have to say first, I was promised a footstool and a Budweiser, and that didn't come around, so
I don't know about the foot. I know we can find a Budweiser around here. We can do that. Yeah.
No, I really appreciate this opportunity. From my background, I grew up in California, in the San Francisco Bay Area. Came to school at NDSU, went back and worked in Los Angeles. So I can truly call myself a recovering Californian. But that experience really helped me here in North Dakota, and I'm truly blessed to spend 43 years working here, and I've worked in every area except for air quality, and I find myself in the oil and gas industry spending a lot of time in air quality. The relationships that we've been able to build in North Dakota, and that's what makes us unique. There's no turf issues. You know the people personally when you're dealing with issues, and things get done. And so that has allowed me to stay here for 43 years, which is very kind of difficult for me to say. It doesn't seem that long. And I think the big guy upstairs was telling me it's time when he took care of my ankle. He just said, you got to get out of here. So I had the dream of walking out of the door with my head held high. Now I think I'm just going to be kind of rolling out next time around. So.
Regardless, congratulations, and we're glad you're here. Rebecca?
It's kind of hard to beat that. So I'm actually originally from Ireland, that great oil-producing nation, and I've actually been in Saskatchewan about 25 years. My career in government began with the Ministry of Environment, and since then I've worked on a couple of files, including innovation, where I was on the board of the Petroleum Technology Research Centre, which is where I fell in love with the oil and gas industry, and so moved from an assistant deputy minister at a role at Environment to Ministry of Energy and Resources last year, so fairly new to their job.
Wonderful. Well, welcome to Bismarck, and we're glad to have you here, and
Thank you.
looking forward to having you here for the rest of the conference. Beth, we'll leave it to you.
All right, so my background is I'm from northeastern Ohio, from a steel town. And when I went to college, I went into earth sciences, and I graduated from the University of Utah, and then I went to graduate school in Bozeman, Montana, at Montana State. And I did my master's thesis on a $1,000 grant from Chevron. So anyway, paid for all my groceries and my tent that blew away. So anyway, after my college years, I found myself in the Forest Service pretty quickly. At the time I was getting out of college, and you guys talk about the low ebb in the oil and gas industry, that's when I came out of college. And so I took the first job that would help me pay off my credit card. And I fell in love with that work, in working with the Forest Service. So I worked for offices in Montana, Alaska, a part stint in Idaho, a handful of years in New Mexico, and now I'm in Bismarck, North Dakota as the Grasslands Supervisor. And when I tell people I wanted to get to a grassland, even though I work for the Forest Service, because the issues, the resources are just different. So it's been a big old education coming out to working in a very active oil and gas energy sector related to the federal public lands. The Dakota Prairie Grasslands, and I have a handful of folks here who do this work. I don't. We have about 1 million acres of the federal lands that are within the Williston Basin. Of those 1 million acres, we have about 1,000 well permits that we are administering, which is in a field with over 20,000. So we figure we have about 5% of the overall activity on individual wells. However, the way the land lays, a lot of the roads, the corridors for utilities and pipelines go in and out of the federal lands and private and state trust lands. So if there is anything that we know we need to do is work together on getting projects moved through. So I hope that we get to talk about that a little more today, and I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, thank you for being here, and thanks to all the panelists for agreeing to take some time with us today. I mentioned in the introduction the word durable, and I said, something that's predictable, defensible, and effective over time. And so that's kind of where we're going to start this afternoon. And Christy, when you think about durable regulation, and you've got experience kind of on both ends, something that holds up across administrations and leadership changes, what design features matter most from EPA's perspective, this EPA's perspective?
Yeah, I think we're in an unprecedented time right now of deregulation, or really just making surgical changes to existing regulations. And I think on the back end, we always face litigation, and I think that litigation has mounted and mounted and mounted and created a sense of fear in our ability to find creative regulations. And so I think in terms of metrics, I think those regulations are important. I think getting things done quickly and efficiently and getting through that litigation is important. But I think the most durable thing that everyone can be doing right now in this unprecedented time is building relationships with your regulators. I think when we see swings and political whiplash, what's really longstanding is the relationships that you build with one another during times that aren't necessarily serving you or that are serving you, because I think your relationship with the regulators is probably your last line of defense, depending on what administration and what you're trying to accomplish. So I think those are probably two of the most important things I would flag.
I know I talked about it in your introduction, but there was there was a time not too far in the distant past where Region 8 EPA probably wasn't going to be at this conference. And so for that, I think we appreciate you more than I think you would understand. Beth, from a land management perspective, what does durability look like when priorities and land use pressures change over time?
So one of the things that we're still working with the 1920 Mineral Leasing Act. And when you read it, it's very short, it's not very long, and it's kind of general, which allows for us to be able to build the specifics locally. There's a component of that we could use some modification for durability, but in our world, durability is having, if we have consistency of our own staffing, the relationships with the operators out there. One of the things that, that we have to adjust to is an operator starts with a well pad, and then a different contractor is doing the build out, and then even other contractors farther downstream. And so our people have to work with all of them, and there's a lot of them. So we're trying to figure out how do we coalesce around maybe the plan to help with the durability and maybe consistency of receiving a permit on a timeline. So that's for us, durability. Our land management plan is from 2002. Our stipulations, initial stipulations, are from 2002. We had to modify them with some changes in Endangered Species Act and a couple other things, but that was in 2018, 2020. So they are, the land management plan has stuck around for a long time. They were intended for 10 years, and they're still here. So there is some durability and expectation there, and the stipulations themselves provided durability. Now, things change, we have to change the steps, so.
Sure.
Anyway, yeah.
Rebecca, from Saskatchewan's perspective, what makes a regulatory program durable, especially given that your regulator is integrated within the ministry rather than arm's length?
So that certainly makes us certainly unique in Canada, in that we're embedded within a ministry as opposed to other regulators across the country. If I had to think about durability, I think it's like the joke. When it comes to regulation, everybody wants certainty until they want flexibility, and certainly when it comes to durability, I think there's elements of both. I mean, for us, it's certainly around that. The policy and the geology and the operational alignment, and recognizing where to, be a little bit more higher, touch, and then where to be a little bit more lower touch, particularly when it comes to managing risk. But at the end of the day, it's really about the consistency in terms of how some of those rules are applied, and then also the relationships that we have in industry and developing them.
Nathan, you've been in the director's role at DMR now for about 18 months, 2 years. When you look at where DMR is today versus where it was when you stepped in, what's changed the most, both in terms of agency direction and how the team's adjusted through the transition?
Yeah, I would just say, when I stepped into the role that I'm in right now, the team was in a really good spot. So it's not like I was coming in having to make major changes. It's certainly been a significant learning curve for me. I was in private industry for a publicly traded company for 20 years prior to that, and so coming over to the government side on the regulatory role has been interesting for me. I guess another major change that has occurred that's really changed the way energy is seen in the United States is the administration change between the prior administration and now. But also, the technical advancements that have occurred in just 3 years are incredible in the state of North Dakota. Lateral lengths in the state just 3 years ago were 10,500 feet long, and the most recent number that we have is that the average lateral length in the state is 13,300 feet, so a 2,800 foot increase in lateral length. When I stepped into my role, I recognized that there were certain retirements that were coming pretty soon, and so we did have to do some slight reorg. to allow for more movement of staff throughout the agency and organization over time. And it really helped set us up for a succession plan to allow for success when these changes occur. We formed a new group. Ashley Thiel leads our hearing and order process group. She was the UIC manager, which is now a position that's going to be filled by Gunther Harms, who was our Williston district supervisor. And so when there's these changes, it has a good impact on the staff and their ability to learn and grow and move throughout the agency. So, that's what I would say are the major changes right now. Yeah.
So as we talk about durability, that all kind of sets the table for the rest of the conversation nicely, I think. And let's talk a little bit about one of the tools that often gets cited as the stabilizer in all of this, and that's data and digital systems. And Dave, we'll start with you. And from a statewide perspective, in your time at DEQ, where has digitization actually reduced cycle time or improved outcomes and not just shifted work around? How's it helped you and your staff?
It's been huge. I made a mistake. I was talking at NDSU engineering class, and I told them, I said, I came from a generation, and when I went to NDSU, they still had kerosene lamps in the hallways. They took me for serious on that. So I'm very careful what I say, but I remember slide rules. I remember the first calculator. I remember the first computer. Yeah. And where digitization has really helped us is, first of all, when we had people do studies, it went into a file cabinet. And when they left the agency, that data kind of went with them. And you kind of were cursed with reinventing the wheel again. And so now with all this data, it's digitization, it's made it more accessible, searchable. You can evaluate more with that. And what that enables us to do is do permits quicker, that are more thorough, and really allows staff to spend not so much time running around the building looking for the data, but having it in front of them and really do that. Sure. Now, the risks to that is, and that you tie in the AI, and I think AI is going to be a great tool going to the future, but it should not replace the decision-making and the experience that the individual engineer or scientist has. And my fear with that is that people will become lazy and just will defer to that and to get done and walk on. And you really have to understand what it's telling you, and it's not always giving you the right outcome.
Right.
So, but the digitization really has allowed us to look at more data quickly and share it with more people.
Christy, from an EPA perspective, what data elements do you think should be standardized across agencies to maybe create that consistency and trust between agencies that I think the regulated community is looking for?
I have so many feelings about that question. Great question. I think when I think about the use of artificial intelligence and AI, and really just digitization in general, I think the biggest benefit and the best use of it is with publicly available information. And the regulatory world is filled with that. And so I think to the extent that applications can be, submitted automatically, it can be used to unify conditions of approval. It can be used to adjust that consistency. And to Dave's point, to not take out that critical thinking and that evaluation of what is this data telling me? What does this mean? Is this appropriate in that application? I think is an important piece of it, but I also think it's important to train the users of those systems to think critically in that way and to make sure that they're using AI to their advantage in that way through prompting and things like that. But I think there's a tremendous benefit to unifying things. I sort of imagine a world where artificial intelligence can create for us, say you have a linear project across multiple jurisdictions, an opportunity to have a singular application, multiple reviews, and a singular approval timeframe that's able to be met because of it. And that's my business pitch in my next life.
Pipe dream or something you think we can actually do?
Imagine a world. Yeah.
Imagine a world,
right?
yeah. Nathan, let's talk about technology at DMR for a minute. What are the most meaningful technical advancements that you've seen since arriving there at DMR, and how have those changes improved permitting, reporting, and your day-to-day predictability for operators?
Yeah, I would say when I saw this question, I wasn't exactly sure where I was going to go with it, but I would say the answer to the how it's really changed permitting is, I don't believe that it has yet. We have a system called North Star that the majority of operators use, actually all the operators use, and we're probably 2/3 of the way complete with finishing that product off. Once that product is complete and we have full implementation of the North Star system, I certainly think there's advantages that both operators and our internal staff can have with North Star. We've kind of restarted talks about prioritizing IT and our technology within the agency. North Star is definitely at the top of that list to finish that off. Artificial intelligence, that's an interesting one. 3 years ago, I really hit, it was probably a couple words that I didn't understand. And, when I saw the AI part of the script here, I was like, well, let me just pass that off to Dave and he'll answer that. And I can avoid that. But the reality is that, or my IT team, but that's not right either. We all have to engage in that. I think AI will be a meaningful part of the agency going forward. We are dipping our toes into it really cautiously. Yeah. I think there's certainly applications where bots and AI can help us out. Probably, maybe less generative AI and more machine learning. A couple examples that I have of areas that I think we could utilize this in is, we have 35,000 different orders or something along that. And how do we potentially speed up the hearing process, or I'm sorry, the order writing process following the hearings? And there has to be some advantage there. But again, we're cautious about that. I certainly expect that when North Star is complete, that the permitting process, first of all, the permitting process is in a really good place in North Dakota. For those of you that don't know, it takes about 40 days on average to process an oil and gas permit. But we have the UIC program as well, and I certainly think that AI will help us out with that into the future. But again, we're careful about how we're going to do that. Full review of everything that goes out of the agency is going to be important to make sure that it's accurate.
I understand the caution. I had my my aha moment probably less than a month ago. I was staring at our regulatory staff from Houston here. Jackie and Keegan have made it to Bismarck this afternoon, and I sat down in a meeting with them in Houston, and we were talking about this panel, and we were talking about AI. And I get that Jackie's quite a bit younger than I am, and I think Keegan and I are the same age. But man, I feel like an old dog learning new tricks with AI at this point. And but I think I'm ready to dive in and learn a bit more about it, and with some caution, but recognizing that it can be helpful at the same time. Rebecca, where does Saskatchewan see the best opportunity for data-driven regulation? And your wells, your facilities, pipelines, and what data or reporting actually improves outcomes without just creating busy work?
I think the challenge for us is the scope and scale of some of the companies that we have, and the challenge in terms of the same rule applying to a company that produces 11 barrels of oil a day versus 11,000. Yeah. That certainly, at the end of the day, you can't necessarily make exceptions, but how do you make sure that that's not particularly onerous or administratively costly? And so, the system that we use is called IRIS, which is an integrated resource information system. And it's about 10 years old now, which is ancient in technological terms. And part of our challenge is thinking about that, because while it is a sophisticated system, it also means that it's inflexible. And when you're thinking about where AI comes into play, what does that actually look like? So very much around standardization, workflows, automatic permitting for certain low-risk activities. We've started to implement a lot of that. You never want to hear a regulator use the word imagination, but sometimes I feel like it's not a lack of information as much as it is a failure of imagination when it comes to thinking around these things. And as a regulator, we tend to have a bit of more of a command and control approach to things. And that's where, those relationships with industry are really important in terms of identifying what those pain points look like, and perhaps where some of those areas are that we need to look to next.
Sure. Beth, your agency is still kind of developing some centralized metrics, and what kind of dashboards or data do you think is probably going to end up being most effective for your leadership?
I think in the short term, because we have a chief who likes numbers, we're going to have to be figuring out how we report our productivity. And so for us to report our productivity, we're going to have to figure out how we gather that up. And so for him in the short term, he's going to want to know, how are we doing in comparison to where we were 2 weeks ago or a month ago?
Sure.
So right now we're doing that by hand, but what I think we all see is the future of our projects needs to have more of a digital signature to it. Right now we deal with maps, we're spatial people. A lot of our stuff is on spatial layers. We probably can do a better job of utilizing our spatial layers in trying to figure out where layout issues are for pipelines and things like that. And can we use AI to do some predictive things? We haven't started dabbling in that kind of thing, but I'm assuming it's going to come at us before we develop something. In the not too distant future, I know that the Forest Service needs to have more connectivity to how the Bureau of Land Management is managing their well information, because they are our subsurface partner. And right now we're not connected in the way we collect and administer projects. As far as we're not using the same permit, we're using some systems that talk to each other and are part of it to deliver it to the BLM, but it's not a one permit, one application program yet. And so I think that's our growth area.
Which is fairly common among federal agencies.
Right. So BLM, Department of the Interior, Forest Service, Department of Agriculture.
Yep.
The departments need to chat.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's stay with you for a second, Beth, on as we kind of shift to performance-based outcomes, and you guys are moving towards outcome-based contracts. What outcomes matter most on the landscape when you talk about outcome-based contracts?
For the first thing we think about is any activity needs to have a safety outcome, because it just does. The other metrics that we look at in the case of we are administering lands for multiple uses. We have endangered species that are insects. We have values that are related to grass. The Dakota Prairie Grasslands has 500 livestock grazers, and every blade is important to them. So for us, looking at how do we minimize disturbance, because that grass, that habitat, plus archaeological resources, they're all important out there to somebody. And so for us, it's using that information to try and, how would you say, avoid impacts and minimize them where you can.
Dave, on performance-based outcomes, where performance-based approaches actually delivered environmental gains in North Dakota?
And I guess, I'll just step back a second. When I look at regulations, the less complex regulations are, the more effective they are.
Yeah.
And when I look at a 1,600-page regulations, I honestly think, what a waste of a resource that we would chop down trees to print 1,600 pages of regulation. In the end of the day, I don't need 1,600 pages to tell me that a flare isn't lit. And the people on the ground, when they see that, they know what to do. I do think, when we look more at what's the performance on the outcome, it kind of unleashes us to not get so caught up in the minutia of the regulations. We should be caught up in how are things performing, and is the environment in a better place? And I think what we appreciate at the state level is minimalistic regulations that not only frees up the staff to look at fixes, but also industry to look at innovation.
Yeah.
And not worrying about misstepping on some chapter 12, triple C, D, subsection 2, whatever. I get lost, and I would actually challenge anybody to read through the whole Federal Register on one element and not lose their concentration, if not lose consciousness after a while. Yeah, it's just how it goes. And so the performance-based of it gets us out, gets us knowing really what are the key issues, how do we get to that endpoint, and that really has unleashed a lot of innovation, I will tell you that.
Christy, I want to ask you the same question, but thinking about those outcomes beyond just checklist compliance, especially in your agency's shift in this shift towards a compliance-first framework, how does that line up with EPA?
Yeah, I think it makes great sense, and I agree 100% with what Dave said. I think this industry is incredibly innovative. You know, in Colorado, we looked at things like greenhouse gas intensity or NOx intensity, and we would just set a target. And the industry is so good, we'd say just hit the target, and they'd find a way to do it. And that's super innovative. I think at EPA, on the compliance-first approach, we're looking at shifting our metrics a little bit. We're still focused on the number of inspections we're going to do, and we're actually going to be doing more, but we're going to have more bandwidth to do that through embracing cooperative federalism, through choosing different metrics like environmental performance, getting into compliance early and often, and trying to identify what metrics that generates for us for true environmental improvement versus getting into, you know, injunctive relief consent, like sort of that longer litigious process, and just finding solutions to get compliance across the board. We're engaging with industry more, and we want industry feedback early and often on what that can look like, because I think the more we can work with you all and build relationships, the better and more robust those systems are going to be.
I know Eric Delzer was thinking he probably needed to go outside for a breath of fresh air, but I think what you're telling us today is a breath of fresh air from that agency for sure. So it's good to hear. Rebecca, how do you think about the trade-off between prescriptive requirements and performance-based outcomes in your ministry-embedded regulator model in Saskatchewan, and where are people most comfortable with flexibility, and where do you prefer just clear prescriptive rules?
Well, from a regulator standpoint, you know, we try and do both, a bit of a hybrid model. So, you know, where there's opportunity for flexibility, we'll craft that. Where there's a need for something more prescriptive, then that's an absolute. I mean, a good example, you know, of something that is, you know, a little bit more performance-based would be, you know, how we treat emissions. And so, you know, we set the targets at a company level. And then it's up to the company himself to decide where they want to invest in terms of technology and what makes the most sense for them. That's not something that we really want to get into or interfere in. And also from a regulatory standpoint, it's actually fairly burdensome for us too. But, you know, anything related to, for example, measurement, groundwater, safety, those are things that are non-negotiable, and those are the things that we tend to be more prescriptive about.
Nathan, you've managed through some meaningful personnel changes across your agency, and you've talked a little bit about that. But tell us a little bit about your reorg, your succession process planning, your goal setting, and how those changes in leadership changes how your agency operates.
Yeah, I spoke about it just a little bit earlier. I would say, you know, when I came in, it was very flat below the assistant director and the state geologist level. Essentially, what we did is kind of create one more layer in there. I thought it was something that was needed as we try to recruit and retain the top talent within our agency. I think it's important for employees to have an avenue of growth throughout their career. And so, you know, that's the basics about what we did with the reorg, and certainly within that, we elevated a couple people into positions that they were certainly ready for, and really created that framework. As far as how it improves, you know, the future of the agency, I would just say that it really makes us more durable. You know, this isn't an agency where you know, we have great people that are running their departments throughout the entire agency. You know, many of them are sitting right up here in the front couple tables right now. The permitting team, hearing orders, the pipeline team, the field inspection team. each of the district offices. In the district offices, we assigned a district supervisor, and it really wasn't a new role. It was a title that we needed to establish to ensure that there's just a clear leader in the district offices. And then right below that, we assigned a lead inspector. And so in each one of our district offices, we have a district supervisor and a lead. And I believe that does the same thing for the district offices. When an employee hires on, they want to grow throughout the agency. They look at the org chart and they see a path to be able to do that. So, those are probably the most meaningful changes. Regarding the succession plan, I think it's healthy for every organization to do this. Every position within the agency that has a direct report has a succession plan that we worked through 12 months ago, something like that. And we're finally starting to see some of the fruits of that work that we did back then in the North Dakota Geological Survey with Ed's retirement and the promotion of Dr. Clint Boyd as the new state geologist. And with that, we assigned I appointed a assistant state geologist in Fred Anderson. And so it's just additional work on Fred. It's not an additional position that we created within the agency. He's still the surface geology manager, also the assistant state geologist. So just added a little bit of durability and I think a little bit more robust org structure for the agency.
When we talk about regulatory durability, I think the other thing we need to talk about is legal defensibility. We talk, as we go down the line, but Christy, in recent years, how has EPA adjusted to how it builds and documents rules and what weaknesses and in administrative records most often make programs the most vulnerable?
It's a great question, and it's hard in thinking about the breadth of what EPA does. I have a different answer for every department, but I think generally what I'm going to say is public comment. And I want to encourage people as these rules are changing to comment with a lot of data, with a lot of volume, with a lot of consistency, not just through the trades, but as individual companies, because we certainly see that on the other side. And I think as we're responding to comments, not just in Region 8, but nationally, finding that national consistency and finding a way to make that, litigation proof is probably the biggest challenge that the EPA faces. Sure. And I think, again, as we're going through these rule changes, the more industry support, the more data that can be provided. We know that those on the other side of the coin are probably not going to hold back in their comments. And we do, in many instances, in many regulations, have to respond to all of those comments, but it helps us make solid regulations. And, I know every oil and gas company is different. I think I said this on a panel earlier. There's like the Schlumberger oil and gas dictionary, but let's face it, if I said, monitoring technology, you could give me 50, and we'd all be talking about the same thing in different ways. And so understanding that and navigating that as a regulator to create a rule that's going to meaningfully apply to everyone in every instance, in particularly for the oil and gas industry, requires you all to give us your individual comments, your individual issues, your individual scenarios and data. So I'm going to push for that, but I think in terms of litigation, the response to those comments is the hardest for us.
Might be time for oil and gas companies to step out of the comfort of commenting through your trade association. You continue to comment through your trade association, but make sure your individual voice is heard as well. That's kind of what I got there. Beth, how does your agency ensure decisions remain defensible years later, especially for major infrastructure or land use approvals?
So we haven't seen a lot of challenges to our decisions. We have had recent changes to our NEPA regulations. In the Forest Service's NEPA regulations are now final. It eliminated scoping for categorical exclusions and for environmental assessments. So for us, the time that it takes for us to do that component of our work, a lot of it is on the front end on survey things, getting surveys done, getting the permits or the applications finalized so then we can authorize them. Durability like I said, for us, we're still working with a 2002 land management plan. We can ensure it can be more durable if nobody asks for us to revise it. But I think it's coming around. I think it's going to come around in the next couple of years. And then we'll end up having to reset again with a new land management plan. And lots of new issues will surface at that time because otherwise the issues of our plan are reasonably settled. So it would take, I think that if we end up getting into a plan revision scenario, we will need people to weigh in on allocations of land because that's what those plans do. They allocate the kind of activities and it allocates what are the quote unquote restrictions based on that land allocation. And so if we open that back up, then that will also lead us to changing stipulations. So all I'm saying is be careful what you wish for.
Yeah.
If you want to quote unquote modernize something. So I think about that, and I think that we have maximized the tools that we have for doing NEPA. That when you do a categorical exclusion, the only challenge to it, you have to take us directly to court. There's no opportunity to comment and pull it. And so the more projects can fit a categorical exclusion, the higher the bar is for somebody who's aggrieved to challenge that project. And they tend to be pretty durable then.
Yeah.
So that to me is like something that industry can do. And when the district folks that are administering the projects are like, well, if we can confine it to this and this, we can fit this categorical exclusion, and that's a better scenario for ease of getting through the review and decision process.
Sure.
So.
Dave, what role does transparency in the record play in protecting programs over time?
Transparency is critical. You know, I would say we start off looking at science and the law. That's foundational for us on everything. It's not agendas. It's the law sets the boundaries to where we use the science within those boundaries to come up with decisions. So it makes transparency very easy. And when your foundation is the science and the law, you make decisions on that, all your cards on the table, everything's transparent as you move forward. You have less of you develop more trust because they know everything's there. They may not like your decision, but it's based on science and the law, and it makes it very difficult to challenge that. Not saying that we haven't been challenged, but we've been fortunate enough to prevail in court. But transparency in the record, make sure that everybody's involved, all cards are on the table. It allows for long-term decisions that really stand the test of time, and it limits the conspiracy theories, the mistrust, and those type of things that can come along with the regulated and the non-regulated community at times.
Sure. Rebecca, you guys aren't immune to policy swings in Canada. Sometimes maybe they're less pronounced, maybe they're more pronounced, but what practices help Saskatchewan's rules and guidance and across government changes, and whether it's stakeholder engagement or clarity of outcomes, transparency in the record, what have you?
So certainly in the oil and gas sector, we're certainly, we're quite trade exposed. We're also, we are also challenged as well by a lot of federal government policies, and not just the policies, but the stacking of those policies. And so for us, what has always been very important has been, I guess what you call here primacy, but certainly negotiating those equivalency agreements and making sure that we're in a position to actually regulate those industries in our province. From we're very fortunate. One of the things that we have in Saskatchewan is we have a growth plan, which is an economic action plan. And that has been really instrumental, both in terms of, managing the risk, but also understanding what the North Star is in terms of a target of getting to 600,000, barrels of oil a day by 2030. And, where that helps us is in those conversations with industry. Like we're all focused on what that means, and we understand what that looks like. But it also means that, it's all about the responsible resource development at the same time. And so that's a helpful way in terms of balancing some of those competing policy agendas between the regulatory side of things and certainly the economic development side of things. We also have a very, very good stakeholder engagement strategy. We work extremely closely with industry, and particularly on any changes that we're making to regulations, particularly on any changes that we're making to directives. And so that's a very sort of structured opportunity to get feedback and understand what the implication of those changes are going to be. So we move across a couple of ranges when it comes to that policy piece.
Let's kind of apply this to all of this to a very recent current issue, or one that everybody deals with on a day-to-day basis, and that's methane monitoring and emissions. And we'll hit a few of our panelists with this. And Christy, what methane monitoring data sources do regulators trust most today, and why?
There's a tremendous amount of them, and I would encourage many of you, if you aren't familiar with METEC at CSU in Colorado, to take a look at the research that's being done there. You'll see many of the vendors here have sort of cut their teeth on that. EPA has an alternative instrument monitoring method that we approve, and there's a website for that I'm happy to provide after if anyone needs it. And we list all of the technologies that are approved. They're all evolving, they're all becoming better. We passed regulations in Colorado in 2021 that requires fence line monitoring for methane. Also, benzene created a tremendous amount of data by which regulations can be generated, could be generated, maybe weren't generated, but that exists. So there's lots of opportunity, but I think there's a tremendous growth in the industry in methane detection. There's a ton of tech out there. It's evolving, it's improving, it's getting really fast. Everything from satellites to ground, airplanes to ground systems. There's also some research that was done in Colorado comparing all three to a very robust emissions inventory and looking at just how different those are. That research is ongoing and continuing through EPA grants. And there's lots of opportunity to continue with EPA funding for those types of things. So I would highly recommend you all take a look at that, because there's all kinds of really cool stuff happening in that space. But in terms of what EPA approves, it's at AIM, there's a way to submit an application. It's very easy to get approved, and there's all kinds of technologies on that list, and we're adding more every day.
So Dave, how do state and federal approaches to methane monitoring align today, and where do they diverge?
Is there a reason why you put Nathan between us and the EPA? Or is that,
I think so.
No, I think you guys probably get along pretty well, actually.
I guess there are a lot of areas where we do align. We both have the same mission, the same desire, and the same outcomes wanting to, at the end of the day. I think where we start to diverge a little bit is our relationship with industry. And really how we perceive industry. And I think a lot of that has to do that industry is on our own backyard. We deal on a day-to-day basis with them, and there's not any distrust. It's not the dirty oil out there doing. And so how we approach it is a little bit differently. I think we both want the same outcome. I think we look more for collaboration because we can, because they're in our backyard. And that's not a criticism of EPA. I just don't think they have the opportunities that we do.
Sure.
And so then our approaches are a little bit different that way.
Yeah.
And I would continue to encourage that. Last thing is, I have been asked by EPA is, how do you get industry to do things?
Right.
And I said, it's very technical. We sit down and we talk with them. And when you sit down and talk with somebody, you'd be surprised on what you can get accomplished. And you don't need a hammer, and you don't need to get a pound of flesh every time you talk to them.
Something I think the industry has appreciated about your approach for a long time. Yeah.
So it's okay that we're separated here a little bit.
It's okay. I agree with you, Dave. And if I need industry to do something, I just ask. Many of you have my number. You know how to reach me. Just ask.
You're talking about reaching out to operators, and that conversation trails works both ways. And Nathan, you spend a lot of time hearing directly from operators about what's working and what isn't. And when it comes to gas capture, how is North Dakota doing right now? What are you hearing from operators in North Dakota about gas capture plans? Are they working? Do they need modification? Are we doing all right? How's that going?
Yeah, I guess a quick follow-up to Dave. I would say that the United States produces the cleanest barrel of oil in the world by far. I follow some an economist that provides me a whole bunch of charts every quarter, probably about 100 different charts. And if you're not impacting some of the highest emission producing states or countries in the world, you're really not impacting a whole lot. We're doing what we can in the United States, but operators are really motivated to produce the clean barrel through their investors, quite honestly. As far as gas capture policy, North Dakota has a solid gas capture policy. I'm proud every month to look at that and say we're well above the policy. When I look at the line, the graph, the line continues to go up and to the right, which tells me that there's still modest improvements that are being made. The largest bite out of the apple per se is probably complete, and the remaining incremental improvements will be done slowly over time. The majority of the new spacing units that we're seeing, 3-4 mile spacing units, not new ones, not all of them, are Burke, Divide County, Northern Williams, and then I would say in between the north unit and the south unit of Theodore Roosevelt National Park. Those are areas that have a little less infrastructure built to them right now. Recently, there was an operator in the northwest part of the state that signed a long-term contract with, I believe it was Steel Reef, to bring to come and get their gas, bring it up into southern Canada, and deliver gas that way and reduce the flaring just a little bit. The other thing I'll say about these other areas, they're not the deepest, hottest, highest pressure part of the basin. They're coming up the basin to the north and up out of the basin to the south, slowly and gradually. But the gas to oil ratios in those areas are lower, and so flaring does occur at times in those areas, but it's on a much lower volume than it has in the middle of the basin, where infrastructure has had time to build, or companies have had, midstream operators have had time to build out to those areas. One of the things that I think is challenging for us is last week, the event that we had last week with high winds. I saw pictures from the field where you couldn't even drive, you couldn't see 50 feet, you had to stop, pull over the side of the road, and at times there's low pressure flares in the field. Very few operators that I visit with do little to no high pressure flaring, but there are some low pressure flares periodically. And in those cases, it's a challenge to manage that. In those high wind events, we had very dry conditions. This is no secret to most people that live in North Dakota. We were blessed with a nice rain late last week and this weekend, and it looks like we're going to have one again this week. But I've visited with several operators here this week, and a couple of them have asked, one just over lunch today, what your guys' plans are when those high events, high wind events, dry conditions occur. And the most recent one said, we just voluntarily shut in. And I was proud of that, because it's just a whole lot harder when the director has to use director discretion to force shut-ins in high wind events. But a couple different operators have said they're doing that. It's certainly a challenge that we see. And I would just urge all operators to police yourself rather than the staff here in the front and the field inspectors out in the field to do that. Those are challenging times. I know nobody wants to shut in production to produce, but maybe you could throttle down. The other thing is that when these things happen, I get a call and there's a fire, and inevitably it was started by a flare, whether it was or it wasn't. I would say, based on just my history of the last year and a half, maybe 30% of the fires that are reported are started by flares. And so, and that's not a, I just made that number up based on, thinking through what I've seen and heard. And so it's not always a flare. So it's really hard for me to call an operator and say, hey, we need to shut in. You guys need to consider doing whatever you need to do to mitigate this. But when we don't even really know the outcome yet. Another good thing that's going on is there's a fire mitigation task force. This task force was formed in October of 2024 when we had significant fire events. I was only on the job for less than a month, and the next thing you know, I'm on a call with, at the time, Governor Burgum, Chairman Mark Fox from MHA Nation about significant fires. The outcome of that was that a task force was formed between the NDPC and the DMR and other agencies, and it's really a large communication network that gets the word out quickly. And I know within the NDPC they have a group, a work group within the NDPC that quickly disseminates information. It's not like they can't tell the wind is blowing and it's dry out there, but the conditions are prime for that, and we need to make sure that we communicate well. So those are some of my thoughts on flaring and what's going well and what isn't.
I'm on the Petroleum Council's fire task force that was put together in response to those fires in 2024. And as we got into May of 2025, we decided to get everybody together in Bismarck and sit down and make sure that these best management practices are in line and ready for what was looking to be a dry summer of 2025. And we sat down in the conference room and watched it begin to rain for what felt like 6 weeks. And we were very lucky we didn't have to use them last summer, but they're items that need to be dusted off and ready at all times. Let's not move away, Nathan, from gas capture and flaring and infrastructure alignment and development for a second here. A lot of talk today about Bakken 2.0. A lot of momentum in the room. Great talks from Undersecretary Hospite this morning. But how important is this phase of development to the state of North Dakota? What are some of the trends that you're seeing that's going to add value to North Dakota over time?
Yeah, I think EOR, Bakken 2.0. That there's a lot of momentum around that. The prior panel that was up here spoke about that. Hoven a year ago was out in Grand Forks, and I was on a short phone call with a group, and kind of wondering how we can jumpstart the whole EOR discussion. And one of the conversations was the state actually already has the right catalyst in place, which is the money that's legislature allocates through the OGRC. Mm-hmm. And so with that, the OGRC, the Oil and Gas Research Council, focused the recent money from legislature to the EOR projects, and so those are great. Those are starting up. I think there's five or six, including the Bakken Production Optimization Program, BPOP, that received funding or grant dollars through that, which is a partnership of 50% match by an industry partner. So that's going to be substantial, but that's going to take a couple years to see the data that's going to come off that. Prior to that, there was roughly 25 smaller scale projects that helped industry work up the learning curve, and they're certainly doing that. But what was really apparent is that we needed to see a larger scale pilot projects implemented, and that's what's going to happen through this. And so, that's where I think it's critical. It's important. It's not the only avenue to increased oil production, in my opinion. In North Dakota, we at the oil and gas division, we have our geology team there that's working on a new updated inventory with different counting sticks on a map, essentially, with 2, 3, and 4 mile laterals where we believe that that's going to occur. That'll tell us, where we're at with inventory in the basin. We also have 17 other formations that have produced. I was just in the geology presentations prior to this. There's an incredible amount of conventional resource in here. Of course, it's just not been the focus since the shale revolution started. So I think there's a lot of inventory in the Three Forks. But the market is such right now that it really pushes the money and the decisions towards certainty. And that's, do I go do an EOR project, or do I drill another 2 Bakken wells that's guaranteed to generate a return?
I don't want to move off this topic without touching base with Beth. From a land management perspective, you're hearing some of these Bakken 2.0 discussions today, and I know we were talking backstage, but what infrastructure risks need more attention in these discussions? You manage the forest, or the Grasslands manages some interesting spots in western North Dakota. There are actual burning coal veins in western North Dakota. I'm not sure a lot of people understand. You get around that that Amadon area and further west
Yeah.
out there, there's some interesting aspects to the geology out there. So what risks are you seeing in these discussions?
So, and just for folks' awareness, we also had fires on Dakota Prairie Grasslands in 2024 that started coal veins on fire, that if you can get into them, we try and get them dug out so they don't continue to burn. But we have places where we can't get a piece of equipment in there, and so those coal veins are like a little ticking time bomb. So that's why we very much appreciate attentiveness when it's super windy to flares, you know. I mean, you got an industry that produces everything is flammable. And so, you know, when it gets dry, we get worried. So for us, it's attentiveness to what you need to do out there. Because I would say on that landscape, you know, for my staff and what they do, our firefighters are at the most risk. And then our folks that are administering oil and gas projects, because we want, you know, they're dealing with the industry, and that, I don't mean that it's unsafe, but it's different when you're out checking livestock allotments and fence lines. So, you know, has to be an awareness to what's going on there. So to me, when industry, and this place, there's just so much new technology going on. And for our folks to be able to stay up on the technology, we kind of rely on some assistance in being introduced to it, how it works. I mean, as everybody understands out there, there's almost nothing locked up. So we have to think about it in terms of public out there on that landscape too. So we're trying to keep that in mind as we understand it better, so we know what the risks, trade-offs are, and we're looking for that continuing education. We have some commitments from NDIC and from BLM and DMR to do a little more cross-training so that we're all up to speed as technology changes, because the risks are out on the landscape. But to me, after fires and employees, we know that the development of this field is a few more acres here and a few more acres there. And anything we can do to think ahead on where can we reutilize locations that are already impacted. Working with the counties, you know, the counties have a large responsibility to everything that happens on those road corridors, and trying to work together up front. That's why this whole EOR thing to me is like, we need a whole bunch more brand new lines going to new places. And if so, can we plan that so that there is some understanding of where the gatherings go? Because it took time, especially up in that Charleston area, to figure out where things could go, because it's a chopped up terrain. You can't just put everything everywhere. So we have to think, we want to be part of that. We don't want to be the last one at the table and just say, here's our plan. So anyway, it would help to be thinking ahead.
You've kind of planted us here on a good topic around collaboration between the industry, the regulated community, and the regulators. Dave, from your perspective, what could industry do differently during the rulemaking process? And what are you hearing from operators today or the regulated community about what they'd like to see more of from agencies as they plan for the future?
From my perspective, and this kind of goes through the whole discussion today, and what I hear from operators, what I hear from the regulators, is make things less complicated. Let's just get down, you know, how many times do I have to, in how many different ways do I have to say, thou shalt not pollute? Going back again, and I'll beat that dead horse until I retire so you don't have to listen to it too much longer. That, keep it simple.
Yeah.
The people in the field, they could care less about methane going into the atmosphere and what it does to the climate change and all that kind of stuff. What we need to do is keep things very simple and put it in a perspective that they understand. Money, gas going up a stack is lost revenue. And when you put it in that perspective, yeah, I can see why I need to capture that. It's not to protect the climate. It's I get more money out of that. Second is safety. If you do certain things, very basic things, you increase the probability that you'll go home at night. So I don't know if I answered your question, but to keep things very simple and very direct and understandable. I will say that there isn't a CEO out there that I've sat with that have said that I could care less about the environment. They always say they care. They want the best thing for everything. But then I ask, what do the boots on the ground do? They have a different perspective. They have to have a checklist to get so many things done. They got to get done quick, and they got to move on to the next thing.
Yeah.
Talk to them. Make it simple. Make it very direct and understandable. Make it tied to money and to safety, and I think you'll see great things happen.
Nathan, from your perspective, same question. You know, what can we do different during the rule making process? We just did it last summer? When did we? Holy cow! But what are you looking for from operators during this process?
I guess I would just say, very simply, more probably improved collaboration.
Yeah.
And I'm going to go ahead and just admit that, that was my first rulemaking session, and I certainly could have did better at that as well.
Yeah.
And it's one thing that I learned through the process. I've been thinking about how we can improve that going forward. Most certainly, as I work up the learning curve, I see maybe inconsistencies in the rule versus the way things are being done now. But we have to, we regulate all operators regardless of the size. Exxon, Chevron, Conoco, some of the very biggest in the world, all the way down to small private companies. And we have to really think through all of those. So, I can do better in this next session. Work within the team here. They're the ones that really know that rule. Dave talked about this subsection and that subpart. If anybody up here knows Mark Borer, I think he's got a photographic memory of that, the chapters. Well, I do not, and so ensure that what we have in place right now meets the demands that we believe we're going to see in the future. Industry is dynamic. Industry is changing. Technologies are improving. We're now drilling 4-mile laterals. Not too much of a problem. I'm not gonna say that there's never an issue with a 4-mile lateral. Although I just heard a geology presentation that 4-mile laterals produce equitably to 2-mile laterals, which is great to hear. But as the economic limits of the field are expanded from, the historical areas within the state. Those technologies change as well. Prolonged $55, $60 oil moved most operators to technically advance their operations. So, that's probably a good summary of that.
The collaboration between your office and the regulated community as we go through rulemaking, as we go through the legislative session, especially, the last legislative session was your first one. You're going to have more experience than a lot of legislators when you walk into the tower in January. But I think from this chair, as the chairman of the Petroleum Council's legislative committee, my challenge to those in the room is be thinking about rulemaking processes and legislative changes, because it might only be May 20th today. Is it May 19th or 20th today? January is going to be here before we know it. It's going to go quicker than this panel, by the way. I don't know if you guys have been, these guys were losing their minds. Like 90 minutes is going to be forever. There's a timer here. This has gone by very quickly. But January is going to be here before we know it. And we're going to be having these same discussions and then rolling from there into rulemaking. Christy, you've got experience at EPA. You've got experience at COGA. You've dove into your past with us today. From your experience, what kind of early engagement most helps regulators design workable rules? Anything different than you've heard today?
I could certainly tell you what not to do.
Maybe that would be a good thing. Yeah.
I think you absolutely have to work with an industry. And I think, data is king, science is king, keeping it simple is really important. But I also think it's important, and one of the things we did a lot in Colorado was to look at categories of industry. We carved out, small operators, majority operators, minority operators. We again looked at targets to hit to reduce emissions and looked at things like intensity. So based on your production, we need you to hit this target. We're not going to tell you you have to have non-emitting pneumatics. Well, just kidding, we already did that. Non-emitting pneumatics, all these extra things, sort of like the carrot and stick traditional nature of it, but just to say, hit this target, monitor it, measure it, report it, and then verify it. And so I think that was a real success story, but that came 100% from industry being really creative and really thoughtful. But there are different scenarios and different actions, and particularly for the oil and gas industry, keeping those regulations simple is difficult, but I think putting things in buckets really gets you there. Yeah. But each time we did a rulemaking or a regulation, we spent hundreds of hours with the agencies, be that it's now called our Energy and Carbon Management Commission in Colorado, or our, Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment, sort of the DEQ equivalent. But hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours of red lines and back and forth and data, and here's our emissions inventory. This is what this looks like. Where can we reduce? So things like that. And I think on the EPA side, we are here. It's a new world order. We are ready to listen. We are open to hearing from you. A lot of our regulation happens at headquarters, but any feedback you all want to provide, they're here to listen. And we do need to hear all of the scenarios early in the process. I think we've had some real fire drills in recent history of concerns about things that we wish we had known a year or two ago so that we could have been working on them throughout these last 18 months or so. So anything like that is really important.
Rebecca, when collaboration is working well, what does it look like in practice from your angle, and especially early engagement before rules are finalized? And I don't know if you'd mind sharing any examples of the kind of industry input that actually improves the regulatory outcome in Saskatchewan.
Yeah, as mentioned earlier, we do have ongoing structured engagement sessions with industry, but a really good example would be certainly around our liability management. That's something that in Saskatchewan, similar to Alberta, we have an administrative levy system in place, and certainly when it looks at how we manage liabilities and site reclamation and remediation, industry has a very large dog in that hunt. And so that's something that we have done a lot of work on in terms of evolving our risk-adjusted licensee liability rating system from something that was, fairly straightforward but not necessarily sophisticated to something, that has some real meat on its bones. And so that's something that was, to some degree, largely driven by industry, because ultimately they're the ones at the end of the day that are going to be on the hook for it in the event of a company getting orphaned or bankrupt. And so that's something that would be a really, really good example. Other examples would be our incident management framework, how we respond to incidents as a regulator. And some of those changes were certainly prompted, no surprise, by a significant incident at a thermal facility. And so that's also another example of where we looked at our review process internally and decided, do we need to take a different approach to how we manage risk around something like that? So those are just two specific examples, but certainly, significant in terms of the impact they're going to have to industry, and in some cases, driven by industry as well.
Beth, what does good collaboration look like before a proposal is submitted on your end?
I would just have to tell you what I hear from the field administrators, and one of the things that they want are plans that don't change. So they'll get a plan and then it'll get revised, and with every revision, if there's a new disturbance area, there needs to be additional land survey that happens. It's also hard to lock in and this is what we're evaluating. So the more upfront, a complete plan. They're starting to ask for the build out of the pipelines and the utility lines, and when a pad proposal comes in, so that it's a package deal because they all kind of fit together. We also appreciate when some of the infrastructure is located on private land. That's one less thing you have to do with the feds. And so, and I know the companies know that, but sometimes when you're in a specific area and it's tight, the other thing they say is come in early and get advice from us. So that would be our Dickinson office and Jason Decker and his staff, and our Watford City office, and that's Kel Bickerdike and his staff. To come in, have a consult, we can guide you, and they're good at that. And so that's something to offer if you got some new folks working for you, trying to work a project through the permitting process, is that just get some advice and then try and hold on to your plan and not change it too much. So.
Beth, keep the microphone close to you because I think we're going to start putting a bow on this for people, and I want to I want to leave the audience with kind of where we started. We started with durability, and predictability, regulation that can last through administration swings. Is this something that is possible? What can we do to get there? But I'm going to pose the final question to each of the panelists. And if you had to leave this audience, Beth, we'll start with you, with one takeaway. What makes a regulatory program more likely to endure over time?
It has to be implementable with our regulations. So we are trying to align with our regulations, and we don't have a lot of them. We don't on the Forest Service side because it's about the surface. So if we can stay aligned with what we have to do to protect species out there, if we get alignment, understand we can't plow through a significant historical feature, and if those help us to have durability of our projects and reviews on them, is that when people understand the values that we have to be very thoughtful about. And grass is, I'll say that again, grass is a value. So durability, alignment with the structures that we work in, and our folks are pretty good at finding the flexibility of those. So, because then if you're challenged, you're operating within the scope of what you're able to authorize, and that has durability. So,
Rebecca, what makes a regulatory program more likely to endure over time?
I think how we think about risk, certainly from a regulatory standpoint, it tend to look at it through that audit lens. And I think, we have to be a little bit forward thinking in terms of how we anticipate risk and what that means, to the companies, how they operate, and then how we enforce those rules.
Dave, this is it, man. What makes it work? You're about ready to retire. What makes it work? What's going to last over time?
I grant my time to Nathan on this one. Really what we found that really makes work is the collaboration and communication. And obviously we'd like to have less complex regulations, those type of things. But when we sit down and we develop relationships and we talk in a meaningful way to really understand both sides, industry understands the regulatory and us understand the industry, we really see some good things come out from that. Quicker permitting times, better outcomes, all of that type of stuff. We are looking internally is that how do we think out of the box and do things differently than what we've done in the past as it relates to permitting, such things as a general permit. Mm-hmm. That is a collaboration between the state and industry, and they get through it was painful process, I will say. Yeah. But when you get to the outcome of it, I think it's going to work really well. Absolutely. And it's going to be very quick. And so I think the collaboration is kind of the biggest thing I've heard over the years.
Okay. Nathan.
Yeah. The prior administration, it comes up with a great plan. They implement it. You move into the Trump administration. They say none of that works. That's not durability at all. That's politics, and it doesn't work. I would 100% agree with Dave. Collaboration and adaptability. Industry changes. Again, they're very dynamic. Market conditions say, hey, it's $50 oil. We can't lay all the rigs down, otherwise our revenue stream is going to go down. Production goes down, revenue stream goes down, everything's challenged at that point. And so, yeah, I would just say, strong collaboration with industry. I would say, recently we've had really good collaboration with the Forest Service and the BLM on certain things on the Dakota Prairie Grasslands and other lands. Those lands, I mean, love it, like it, or hate it, I believe they'll be developed by industry over time, and I think it's critically important for the state of North Dakota and the resources to work together on that. One of the advantages that those grasslands will have, I believe, is that we can drill 4-mile wells now. These wells are, 31,000, 32,000 feet in total measured depth, and if we can work together well enough with industry, we could potentially plan out corridors that are 6 to 8 miles apart. And many of those lands that North Dakotans and other people love will continue to be there as well for generations. So we have to adapt and we have to be collaborative.
Christy?
The benefit of going last, I think, is that I get to say I agree with what everyone else said. I'm coming from a very different place, but I also recognize that I'm probably the last place between you all and a cold beverage. And I think what I would say is if you can hit a sweet spot when you're producing a regulation that makes everybody a little angry, you're probably in the right place. And with that, I'll just let you all know that when Dave's buying me a cold Budweiser later, you can put that down in the North Dakota history. So
Yeah,
I'll leave it at that.
Christy, Nathan, Dave, Rebecca, Beth, thank you guys so much. Been a tremendous panel this afternoon. This is exactly what we look for in panels like this at the Williston Basin Petroleum Conference. So let's give them a hand one more time. You guys can feel free to head backstage. So before we head into the social, I'm the last thing between me and Christy are the last thing between you and a cold beverage. I want to thank our 2026 bronze sponsors, 10 Code, American Oil and Gas Reporter, Amplified Industries, Baker Tilly, Bull Moose Capital, Enbridge Pipelines, Endurance Technologies, Engage Mobilize, EOG Resources, Flomax Compression, Flowco, Gallo Solutions, iKeating, Key Energy Services, Murex Petroleum, the North Dakota Department of Commerce, Palmer Manufacturing and Tank, Pembina Pipeline, Ratke Service, Ranger Energy Services, Salisbury Industries, Sincerion Connected Solutions, Strobel Companies, and Tegra Corporation. So please thank them when you see them out in the exhibit hall. And to all of our sponsors, both all presenting platinum, gold, silver, and bronze, thank you all very much. This conference is built on your support, and we're grateful for every one of you. Now we invite you to join us in the exhibit hall for our final networking and hosted bar of the trade show. The trade show closes tonight at 6 o'clock, so please take this last opportunity to connect with our exhibitors and outdoor exhibits as well. We'll see you tomorrow morning bright and early at 7:45 for an action-packed final day at the Williston Basin Petroleum Conference. Have a great night, everybody.